Hollow Knight is the type of game that at first glance would seem to be impossible to beat with reversed gravity. And if you would think that, then you would be correct, because unfortunately, a few essential elements to completing the game break upon reversing gravity, making the game completely unbeatable. Yes, I am saying that you will not see me beat this game with gravity constantly reversed. However, with a few self-imposed rules, the challenge becomes kind of fun. Rule 1. If I manage to touch hitboxes for activating objects, such as doors, benches, charms, etc., I will be allowed to interact with the object. Rule 2. Upward-facing transitions don't work with reversed gravity, so I will be allowed to change the gravity back to normal for a brief moment. And Rule 3. About half of the bosses break in a way that I am unable to hit them, or I am unable to finish the fight. When these situations arise, I will flip the gravity back to normal. If I come across a situation that does not fall under any of these three rules, then I will chalk it up to lack of movement/strength, and not the game outright breaking due to reversed gravity. When this happens, I will cheat to progress, and then put 1 tick on the cheat counter. And because this is mostly just a video showcasing what is possible with gravity reversed, and not a challenge, I will use crutches that slow down time or enable hitboxes frequently. And as of editing this video, I think I may have used the hitboxes too much, as when I would use them, I would often forget to turn them off, and for that, I apologize. Now unfortunately, just before entering Dirtmouth, I have to do the biggest cheat in the entire run, and first move as far left as I can, to reverse the gravity back to normal for the shortest amount of time. However, before doing that, if you go above Dirtmouth too high, as I have to do in this room, you reach a background sprite, which is purposeless for the run, but pretty interesting. After entering the well, the only option to travel, just like in regular gravity, is towards the starting shaft. And at the start of this room, the very first jump is just barely possible with the help of the fly. And speaking of the fly, you might realize that the knockback given to the fly is reversed, which is odd, but helpful for the run most of the time. Immediately after the jump, I can attempt to enter green path because of the gravity flipping the boulder. Unfortunately, the jump to approach the boulder is just out of reach, and it is impossible to die to anything to spawn the shade. So again, I have to cheat to make it past. But before I do that, it is most optimal to cheat again and go to the hot springs bench so that I can bench warp out of needing to cheat again in green path. After entering green path, it is clearly best to take the any % speedrun route. Now I will get soft locked if I fall at the start of this room. As I was saying, the end and start of the room will lead to being soft locked, so we do not. Right after the soft lock room, the next room immediately has this little guy try to ambush me. The Moss Knight room, we can fortunately just skip by taking the shortcut just before Hornet. In Hornet though, the jank starts. Immediately when the fight starts, Hornet falls to the roof and makes it impossible for me to see her. So I have to turn on camera lock just so that I can show you the pretty easy fight, which is me just giving her a thrashing after she makes the crucial mistake of doing an attack that freezes her. After defeating her, I need to flip the gravity so that the game can detect her as being beaten, and so that I can get a crucial item, the cloak. After the fight, I can simply warp out of the arena, back to the hot springs bench to prevent a few soft locks, and to put me in the ideal spot to get the claw. After some extensive research, I can kinda confirm that the best way to get the claw is to take this path through Teacher's Archive, which will have me cheat the least out of any other path that leads to claw, or any other movement upgrade for that matter, such as Crystal Heart. So after performing 2 pretty difficult jumps, the first jump requiring me to spawn enough of these flies so that I can pogo up to the entrance to Fog Canyon, and the second jump requiring me to make a very precise pogo off of a background barrel to make it up to the ledge just before entering Fog Canyon. At the start of Fog Canyon, I am faced with yet another challenging section where I am forced to go fast so that this jelly doesn't float down low enough so that I am unable to progress. However, that's light work compared to the detritus coming up. But before that, I attempt to get this charm notch to make my life easier, but fail, where I for sure did the previous 3 jumps completely legitimately to get back. Anyways, I simply have to cheat to get past the Teacher's Archive room because of the lack of enemies in High Ledge. Right after the Teacher's Archive room, There is a ridiculously hard jump with slowing down time required to make it a humanly possible jump. I have to pogo off of the small jelly into as high as a dash as I can do towards the larger jelly to pogo again to reach the ledge or floor, I guess, depending on your perspective. But there's yet another level of complexity in this jump, as the small jelly probably has to spawn moving left to make it possible. But finally, after perfect movement, I managed to make it. But even after that, just a couple jumps later in the same room, I'm forced to do an even harder sequence of jumps. Of course, still with the crutch of reduced game speed and hitboxes visible. To perform the tricks, you have to first pogo off of the first jelly, staying as low as possible to not get hit by the heat-seeking missile. Hit the second large jelly as fast as possible, dash here, then jump on this little ledge to get as high as possible to pogo off of the last jelly to just barely reach this final edge. However, as you just saw, this all depends on where the last jelly spawns, which I cannot see until the very end. If it spawns too low, I'm screwed before I know it. But if it spawns high enough, which I think is about a 1 in 4, then I am barely able to make it, if I perform everything perfectly before that and as quickly as possible. So to sum it up, this trick is just one big speed check with a 4-sided dice roll thrown in there. Finally, however, after hours, I make it past this pure garbage and am into Queen Station and Fungal Wastes. The Queen Station bench, unfortunately, is impossible to get to, which is simply inconvenient. As if I die, I will need to perform the hell you just saw again. The first room of Fungal Wastes does pose a bit of an issue, as finding a way to reach the exit becomes a bit of a problem. But if I wait to position this flying shroom in the right place to pogo off it twice to reach this platform, the rest of the room becomes trivial. Granted, with 0 crutches, it would be quite hard, but not impossible. The next room, prior to the mini-boss mushrooms, is easy, but the mini-bosses themselves become a kinda hard, interesting fight. The acid sliding on the floor can be annoying, but pogoing on top of the bosses makes it a lot easier. The only really difficult part of the fight is the very end, where I have to find the perfect moment to pogo and kill the mushroom at the same time to reach the exit, where I must not under any circumstances get soft locked. Anyways, after of course not getting soft locked, I can do these repeated pogos off of the shroom and continue until I make it to the fungus bomber, where to activate it, I must jump and dash stall as high as possible to get it to detect me so that it can shoot. I struggle a bit with this, but it really is a simple explosion pogo. This next room becomes slight hell, and theoretically would be complete hell. Trust me. I first have to reach this bouncer to die, so that I can spawn my one-time shade. One time, because shades can only be used to do one skip in between benches, of course. Anyways, after dying and making my way back through everything, legitimately, I can pogo off my shade with a little stall so I can make myself and the shade reach the section where I can then make this jump by pogoing the shade a second time, effectively skipping 2 sections with one shade. But there is an issue. The final jump in this room into the lower transition is impossible without a shade. So unfortunately, I have to cheat and kill myself twice, despite having not reached a bench. The fake skip is doable as long as I make sure the shade does not warp back to its spawn, and as long as I make sure I hit it once before, due to now entering a new transition. This next single room, though, was the most annoying one I had to do in the entire run. The entire room slowly introduces you to the mechanic, you could say, that this room forces you to learn. The first jump off of the first shroomling is precise, but not that hard. The second jump off of the second shroomling, however, makes me have to wait for the shroomling to float downwards low enough to be able to just barely get enough height. This jump, while incredibly annoying, still does not require the use of any crutches, and I am able to get past it in a matter of 10 minutes. But like learning any game mechanic, the last part in learning it has to be the hardest. And so I'm forced to do an incredibly hard 2 pogos off of 2 shroomlings to make it to Mantis Claw. Matter of fact, it's so precise that I'm not even sure if it's possible. To theoretically make it, I have to try to get the highest shroomling to float as low as possible, while the lowest has to be as high as possible, making it possible to pogo the second shroomling. And yet, after hours of trying, I still have to get half of the knight's hitbox up higher to be able to complete the trick. And I did give up on this, had the cheat counter ready and everything, but I decided to attempt the trick again, and somehow, after decades worth of attempts, I got this one. Just look at how close each slash is from missing. I have to register inputs as soon as it is possible to register them to have a chance to complete the entire trick. And finally, I managed to get it. And don't even get me started on the floating patterns of the shroomlings. The setup, even before the trick, is torturous enough. They have to both be as high and low as possible, and waiting for something like that to occur took forever. I genuinely attempted this for centuries before I managed to get this, and I can safely say that this is the hardest trick I had to do in the entirety of the run. The jump into the end of this room transition is also almost impossible, but as long as I slide down the slope just enough, I can get into Mantis Village. Getting up into the Mantis Claw room is easy, but getting the claw requires some manipulation of the flying mantis's movement, so that I can pogo them to finally get claw. Now from this point onwards, the progression and editing will speed up quite a bit to points that are actually challenging, due to the knight's movement now being a lot better. After getting claw, the best thing to do is try and get Crystal Heart. Out of the 2 abilities I can get to enter Crystal Peak, I decided to go for Desolate Dive. After easily descending back into Crossroads, the best way to get to the City of Tears is to go through Blue Lake, which requires fighting Gruz Mother. The fight is easy, except for the end where I need to slash the roof of the room in hopes of killing the Gruz flies spawned out of the Gruz Mother's death that clip through the wall. Blue Lake fortunately doesn't pose any kind of threat, and the elevator into City of Tears also thankfully doesn't jank out. I progress normally right up until the Hornet cutscene, in which I get stunned briefly in the scene and then fall to a fortunately placed barrier at the top of this room. But in this room I have to perform a pretty difficult jump that requires the use of a literal delayed wall jump, where I first dash into the wall and after a delay jump away from the wall, resulting in this. Instead of this. Anyways, after a couple of deaths, I get the pogo off of the roof spikes and can progress to Soul Sanctum. But before fighting Soul Master, I was hoping I could get an upgrade for the nail, but unfortunately currently I'm unable to get it, which will make the fight a lot harder. I also want to deposit my relics to Lem just in case. And again, I have to make a pretty precise trick, and have this guard stand exactly on this ledge, so I can pogo up to the transition. The rest of this area is easy, as well as the Soul Warrior. But once more, stupidly hard platforming starts. Soul Master is made in a way that flipping gravity does not affect him at all, which makes the fight harder. Also, the places I can be to actually deal damage to him are extremely limited. And unlike giving myself a crutch in extremely difficult platforming sections, I can actually make myself stronger legitimately this time. Because of this, I decided to go get an upgrade to my combat capabilities by improving my spells. After backtracking to Fog Canyon, I move into Queen's Garden, where after pogoing off of these moss flyers, I'm into Overgrown Mound. Defeating the Mosquito Battle Arena is easy, and finally, I can get a spell without having to reverse gravity, since acquiring spells only requires you to move into it. For now though, I'm gonna have to stop with the first part of this challenge. Mostly because it took too damn long, and I don't want to release it all at once. But the second part of this video will be released in about a week from now. But I hope you enjoyed this first part. See ya.